a few things that have been discussed.
Sorry, I forgot to start that recording.
Thank you. And just so you know, I'm not delegating my responsibility. I'm supposed to record it, Dropbox it, and then send it to Deirdre. Since she's
Cutting
in
out
the
the
group,
middle.
we're saving that step. So I hope that Haley can rejoin us. And I'll just share, TJ, what I shared with Deirdre. I've used Zoom for work meetings with up to 30 people since the beginning of COVID, and they update features like overnight. We would have done test things, and I noticed even when I joined today, that feature was not in a place I expected. And it also varies whether you're on an app, whether you're on your phone, whether you're on the desktop. So that's something we'll have to work out within the larger group.
Yeah, people just need to have a little flexibility with and patience with it. It's just there's always something. But otherwise we would have postponed today, right?
Exactly. Exactly. We've all got, well, me being who I am, I put together a little outline so that we have an idea of what we were trying to accomplish today. Is my screen showing up for you? I know it's teeny tiny if you're on your phone, TJ.
Yeah, it is. As long as all the words are as big as the title, I'll be good.
They're not, but I think I can blow them up. I think, let's see, can I zoom?
It's good how it is, Michelle.
Yeah. And it's not going to be news to you. So given the composition of our group here, as Rick pointed out, this is the start of our tag breakouts. This was our compromise to figure out how we could do committee work and still meet the public meeting laws for Vermont and bring in various people either from tag or outside experts. I do hope Haley can join us. So the three that are meeting today, we are the pacing group. Looking at the task of the tag for making recommendations on the process for the 10-year schedule and reporting that's built into the act. So I just summarized here. This is the same material that's in the agenda that Catherine provided for some of the things that the groups are looking for. And I bridged that down a little bit for us to identify what we want our priorities to be really over the next month. And short, let's see, so the goals for today is, given what are our priorities, take the takeaways from the workshop in February. There were some other comments from interested parties that were included that are on the EPUC. Welcome, Haley. We'll pause and give you a chance to get settled.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's all right. The logistics, that's all right. We'll get through the tech logistics, and you've probably been doing this as much as I have. The whole group will figure out what Zoom's doing today, and in 2 weeks they might have updated their platform and changed it, tweaked it a bit. So is my shared screen showing up on your computer?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to actually drop back from what I've got here on the screen and just take a moment. Haley, Deirdre, TJ, and I have been meeting for months now as appointed members of the tag, and I know Emily brought you in. Not putting you on the spot too much for a quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an analyst at the Efficiency Vermont regulatory team, and have just been involved in some of Efficiency Vermont's filings in the Clean Heat Standard proceedings. So I'm coming to this with, certainty like awareness of the current proceeding and where we're at, but would just here to help represent Efficiency Vermont's participation on this pacing issue. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. And I see Alex Reese has joined us too.
Hello. Hi, I'm Alex Reese with EGS.
Great. I will. Go back to sharing my screen for what we'd like to accomplish today. And one unofficial thing that I'd rather address now, rather than as we run out of time. I've got a timer going. We've got 27 minutes and 59 seconds left. I know that I will not be able to attend the next TAG meeting in 2 weeks. And I know we'd like to continue these meetings. Looking, TJ, you're the only other person right now. Would you be willing to be the lead for that meeting? So basically,
Yes. Yeah,
lead the
I can do,
meeting
I
and
can
do the
cover that
report
one.
up.
I was looking at the date to make sure I was going to be around, but I can do it.
This happens to be a rare situation where I have a vacation and it's completely off the grid. So I am totally on vacation, which will probably be a first.
We're good. Yeah, you need those breaks. That's good. I can handle it.
I have no doubts about that. Thank you very much, TJ. So, so I've got these things here for priorities. Would I be putting you on the spot, TJ, to ask, let's see. I've got typed up all of the different responsibilities that TAG pacing fits in. I really don't think that this particular group needs to go in too much, but I did also summarize what you had put together, your team had put together, TJ, with our priorities. And I know coming out of the workshop in February, one of the things that jumped out at me was, even before we get results from either of the consultant teams, how we're going to define that reference year, which is the baseline for everything that's reported as far as progress, and what the sources of data. And I know some of that's coming from other working groups. We're awaiting input. But our key, I'm going back to define what we want to have as our priorities. And I put defining the reference year and understanding our metrics as 2 important items to include here. I'd like to hear what other folks are thinking.
Yeah, I'll go, and I just want to identify that we put out that straw proposal, and I think there was a lot of agreement, but I don't think everybody agreed on some of the steps, which you identified one of them, like what is the reference year, and I think we identified that as you could do a bunch of different things, and I agree that's definitely a TAG priority. The other thing is, we proposed that eventually we have to come up with a measure mix in order to identify the obligations going forward, and I recall from the workshop not 100% of people being on board with that, and I think the PUC is kind of up to say what it thinks the process should be, and so we may have to just wait on that part, but I think that's down the road anyway. So I would say that may not be a priority in the short term, but in the long term, I still think that needs to happen, but we could discuss that at the right time. And the third thing is just, I think we could just get started with phase one, and maybe this might be more than you were looking for right now, but the first step is to take that, where we are now from the inventory and create a trajectory using the inventory, the GWSA accounting, to get to 2030. And that step seems simple to me. If I wish it didn't seem like Brian Woods was here today. Maybe he was and went to the biofuels one, but
he too switched to this breakout group, TJ, but he's
okay.
away this week.
Okay, great. Well, he will be critical to doing that first step, I think, or he and his team.
Absolutely.
I actually hope that we can impose on him to just do a draft of it and whatever we decide. But
wait, when you say that, TJ, what can you explain for the larger group what you envision as a draft?
Yeah, so we have in the trial proposal, we had outlined the first step of saying, and it's a required step by the statute, of saying how is the thermal sector under the clean heat standard going to gradually reduce emissions to get to the 2030 goals and create a trajectory, a GWSA trajectory. And so I think that's the first step. We need to decide if it's linear or if it's a hockey stick, or what the shape of that curve is, and because that then ultimately flows into what each obligated party's requirements will be. So.
Any comments from either Haley or Alex at this point?
I have some additional topics, but happy to wait if there's discussion on what TJ just shared.
I have a quick clarification point, actually. So I agree A&R is the best position to look at most current data in inventory now, where GWSA is, and think about what that curve looks like. Do you see the potential study being the missing piece of information to, if it's a hockey stick or if it's linear or if it's super jagged? Like, is that the source of information that you think is needed there?
That's a really good question. I think so. Parallel to the potential study, there's the NV5 is doing a workforce report, and that could be informative.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the tag could actually just set this first schedule, and now the potential study could help, maybe shape it, but we would do a draft or an interim schedule in order to just get it started.
Mm-hmm.
So I started talking before I started thinking, which is a problem with me sometimes. And so, that potential study is going to help in terms of program potential, how quickly measures can get out there.
Yeah.
And also the PUC, the technical consultant for the measure mix and the metrics associated with each of those, that also will contribute to this. I personally am with TJ on thinking that, given what we know now and historically what Vermont has been doing, this would be a good time for us to put together a first draft trajectory, given the information that we have, and that would give us some ideas of critical milestones or missing information. Mm-hmm. And then as those other resources become available, we develop the actual deliverable that's required through the statute.
Yeah, and I think this part is really process related, like how we will go about doing this in future years too. Not just the first set of credit obligations that we're required to put in the rule, for example, but really the how we continue drawing that line for 2030 and to 2050. So I think the commission understands that not all the information is there yet, but to the extent like you can start thinking about what is needed, what are the inputs, that's super helpful.
And I think this is a good start. Anything else we should capture here before continuing on?
I had its topic sort of related to reference year. In that commission workshop on this topic, there was some discussion of weather normalization, if and how to do that. And I noticed in the reply comments that there might be disagreement among parties of like if weatherization normalization, or sorry, weather normalization is like just not required by statute, if it's something we should or should not do. And I think it's also something like, would annual credit requirements be weather normalized, or just like the forecast of future emissions projections be weather normalized? Like, I think there are specifics to be worked out there. So maybe and it's very in the weeds, but like one question for this group is, do we think TAG should make a recommendation on if things should be weather normalized, and if so, what, to the commission when doing this pacing work?
In my,
And so I may have
another,
I may have mixed up and said weatherization normalization.
yeah,
I
no,
meant
no, you
weather.
went, and
Sorry
I
about that.
wrote WX just as a shorthand, knowing that we're
Okay.
talking weather, but you're right.
Great.
Within, we don't want to confuse things because weatherization is going to be potentially one of our measures. I have a professional opinion on that, but I'd like to ask you, Haley, that's definitely an important consideration. And given actually the whole motivation for this act is partly because of the things that are happening to our climate, I personally don't think we can ignore that, and have seen that we have the tools to incorporate that. If I ask you, Haley and Alex also, what are your feelings on whether we've got the tools so that we can apply the normalization in a way that would satisfy all the parties involved?
I would think that we have information available to decide on how, if and how weather normalization is baked into this. I know that as part of other models that we do for the energy sector, normalization is part of that. But I think it's also like a process question before we reach the data. It's sort of like, what parts of the annual requirement piece or the forecast piece, like whether those receive weather normalization, and how that's incorporated is sort of like the process piece first, and then the data.
Can I ask a
Please,
question?
TJ.
So
Yes.
on the so I totally understand weather normalizing the reference year and how that works. And there's like a question: if you choose 1 year, weather normalization seems to make sense. If you're choosing like a range of years, do you need to weather normalize? I think that's a question. I guess I'm not understanding weather normalization for future years. Is that like a credit value question, or is it are we weather normalizing the obligation, emissions reduction obligation for entities? I don't know. Well, that raises a bunch of other questions, but
That's an important nuance, TJ. And I think something that we do not independent to this group.
yeah, and just as far as the potential study goes, at least, and how they're going to create values, I guess those will be average, right? If there's the prescriptive values will be average, weatherization on average will save this much, and that will kind of be weather normalized in itself. The custom values would, I think that's a credit value question in the custom sector of like, and personally, I think that you have to weather normalize that. Hey, we verified that in 2026, this custom measure saved 1,000 gallons of fuel and this many associated emissions. You know, but it was a really, really cold year. So on average, it's not going to save that much. And so we need to deal with that in the credit valuation part.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, we could easily talk for longer on these subjects. I'm looking at the time. We've got 13 minutes remaining.
Would I be able to add just one more thing
Of
related to the
course,
measure
that's what I
mix?
was going to ask, if you can, and if this is what we accomplished today, that is, I'd consider this a successful meeting. So I'm not looking to go off, just if there are other things that you folks want to make sure we cover today. Please continue.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering if we might want to expand that measure mix bullet just to be maybe more just pointing towards this tension between life cycle emissions and sort of what the clean heat standard requires about that versus you know, having it meet our a reduction pursuant to GWSA. So and I know that the measure mix approach and process is sort of a component of addressing that tension. But I just thought it would be worth just, expanding that out just a bit, just that as part of this process, I would just wondering if, TAG would want to make a recommendation on process on how to address that tension. Knowing that statute sets it up in a certain sense. So there's certainly things that we can't we're limited by statute. But yeah, just wanted to connect those dots between the tension and then this measure mix bullet.
I'm glad you did, and that has been a topic of great discussion at earlier meetings, so I do not want to miss that out.
Yeah, so there are those tensions, and I continue to advocate for the tag to just be a group that looks at the technical implications of different choices, because the PUC is already getting recommendations from a wide group of people, including a bunch of people on the tag. And so I just wanted to point that out, that process to deal with the tension, it's like kind of the implications, and there's like this balance of where the tag's role is and how far this group should reach.
Yeah, I totally agree, TJ. Like, it can easily get really big. So keeping the focus on the technical aspect of this makes sense, and it's a good reminder about how we're approaching these. Yep.
Was there anything else to add there right now on what's on the screen? This is
Well, so there's
not a given.
The process that we put out in the straw proposal was to start with this just broad sector wide emissions path, and then also just take that GWSA inventory wide approach or using the greenhouse gas inventory to allocate across obligated entities. And so I don't know if there's and I'm not even sure if that step was necessary in the straw proposal. We put it out there, but that's kind of like a maybe. But if we were to do that, I think there's a step for the tag to take the registration data and the data of the obligated entities and how much fuel they're using, and actually translate that to each obligated entity, and it starts to give them give us an idea and a structure of who's getting what share of the obligation. Again, I don't know if that step is actually necessary, but if it is, then that might be something we do. And I don't even know if we can do that, because that some of that data I think is confidential. So
Well, there's that, and I do recall some a word I heard in a meeting yesterday was intensive fellowship. So intense conversation about the accuracy of the fuel sales. If are we using the tax information? Are we using the actual sales? I know that's something that's being shared with within involved organizations, but not necessarily with the public or even the tag at this point, as you share. TJ, there's confidentiality that was agreed to for the fuel dealers. So do we have a clear resource for understanding what the volumes are for the different fossil fuels?
I think what ANR and it would be great, once Brian, I'm sure the whole group would probably benefit too from like a inventory, almost crash course or something that Brian could give. But I think they have access to aggregated tax data now, right? Of fuel tax data, I think.
Though I think one of the points was that for the tax data, if it's, say, brought into the state, sold by one wholesaler to another distributor, that it might be counted multiple times.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the workshop, Matt provided more details on.
He did.
Yeah, so
And that's a
I
good
don't really
point.
have a
Go
comment
back to the notes.
beyond that. Yeah.
And I've got that up on the other screen, but we can from workshop and filed comments. So much of this we don't have to reinvent. Over the last couple of months, information has been collected. Okay, so I'm going to return here. We've got 6 minutes. Thank you all for your time. For our priorities in going to report back to the larger group this morning or this afternoon. Yeah, it's still this morning. If we summarize what our priority is right now is to see if we've got enough information to both work toward a draft trajectory and coordinating with the various parties involved on our reference year. Am I hearing folks for what we could conceivably work on over the next 2 to 4 weeks? And I don't want to put words in your mouths, so please.
Yeah, I think the first and third bullet there over the next 2 to 4 weeks is what we could do.
As in these two here, the draft trajectory or the reference year, and start with phase 1.
The reference year and start with phase 1. Maybe it's just start with phase 1. Maybe I'm overthinking what we could accomplish. But
So I would think that it will be useful for the potential study to have a sense of what the reference year is. I'm trying to remember how they're actual task is defined. But
Well,
that also could
they
be
need to
captured
just
within phase one.
right, and they're just going to hit the target in 2030. And I think that will then inform kind of where we set it. I'm not sure I mean, they have a reference here of the fuel in use in 2005, I think is the 2030 target, right? So that's we know what the target is in 2030. And yeah, I'm not sure how the potential study needs a reference here.
Okay. Appreciate that
Like, is
clarification.
the reference year, yeah, like more associated with the obligation setting? TJ? Is that what you're?
Think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because in that early action credits kind of play into that as well, I think, of where do we set a reference year that already is after we're counting for some early action credits or not? It seems to me we should use 2022 as a reference year or some combination of years prior to 2022, just because of that issue. But sorry, that's substance, but that is a question. Yeah.
I suspect we're going to see the notice shortly for being returned to the main session. So I do want to thank everyone for the discussion here. Any other topics we want to make sure we share with the larger group today as we head back?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that the straw proposal is what we move forward with, then I think as for this group, our work plan could then be fleshed out with that proposal or however the commission modifies it. That kind of sets our.
And we do have notes for, as you said, the minor modifications to that straw proposal.
Yeah, I think for efficiency's sake, that was a great idea to use DPS proposal as kind of the one to move forward with and suggest refinements to, rather than waiting for a commission. I mean, that's just coming from me, not the commission, but that's what I feel like is the most time efficient option. The only other thing I would suggest is just to focus on process, rather than numbers at this stage. To the extent that we, that there can be like a mock-up of some of the more technical pieces, I think that's probably helpful. But I think that's what's maybe ripe for what we have access to right now is more process questions.
I think that makes sense. Whoops.
So Michelle, you did a great job facilitating us. Did you have other areas that the rest of us missed that we should add here?
This was where I wanted to, we've covered what I wanted to today. Thank you for that, for the kind words, TJ. I had materials if we had time to go further, but this is where I expected it. That's why my blank slide showed right where they did. I think that the reference that I'll bring back to this and would recommend that you use for next time is more of the specifics from the straw proposal. So that can be the literal framework for laying out the steps. That's my only disappointment. I'll miss that next meeting. But
Well, that's actually a question. Are we going to have these meetings only during the tag meeting, or are we going to meet in between? It seemed like there may be ability or need to just meet in the interim to move things forward as a work group.
The goal is to do as much as we can here so that we can piggyback on the meeting warnings and the Zoom links. This group is free to meet at other times, though we will have to go through. Are you the one who helps us with that, Deirdre?
Oh, probably,
Making sure that we warn things 24 hours in advance, that agendas are posted, and that it is accessible to the public.
But I was curious about that too, if Catherine's gonna suggest, just based on limited time, that, you know, breakout groups and based on ramping up, you know, maybe right now we don't have a whole lot of work plan set up, but soon that will be the case, and I don't think we'll be able to have 2 to 4 weeks on each topic area, which is painful, I know. So I think there might be some off-week meetings that might
Absolutely.
eventually need to happen, yeah.
And so we are treating them as public meetings, Deirdre. There was some, I think, some
Yeah,
question at the end of the last meeting about that, I'll just say.
yeah, I think that because it's considered the business of the group, even without decision making, that really broad definition of meeting, you know, the Commission GC considered that that intersection of public meeting and the subgroup, which is just defined as the larger group as long as quorum is set, and you can't have a meeting without quorum, all that. I think it's okay to it shouldn't be a heavy lift for people. Just let me know when, ideally 3 days in advance, so we can get, you know, to the clerk and she can post the notice of the meeting. So I do need more like 3 days in advance, so we can make sure that the notice is warned 24 hours in advance. A really short agenda, you know, really basic meeting minutes. And depending on if we have a commission staff there, we can maybe do the minutes just to take that off the list.
Got
Much
it.
appreciated.
I'll just point out that I meet with Brian Woods as a course of you know, just our agencies interacting, and we're both tag members, and this topic will come up, and so that I don't think that's a public meeting because we don't have a quorum. So I'm not expecting to notice those kinds of things. Like, I wouldn't have thought this was a public meeting. There's 2 tag members on it.
Yeah.
So, but that's what you guys decided. That's what it is.
Yeah. I think it's that recent case law in Norwich that forced kind of was a
Yeah.
similar thing. It was subcommittees meeting that was, you know, pretty recent, 2022 or something. But yeah, if it's a lot of work, but
Got it.
Okay, and they're waiting for us in the main meeting.
All right.
All right.
Room.
Thank you,
I don't
everyone.
know how to get back.
How do I stop the recording? Stop video.
Right.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Michelle and everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.